Oversight Committee. I'd like to start the meeting. I love doing that. And the first agenda item is the call to order.
Okay. Member Adams,
Present.
Member Dilworth, Member Engdahl, absent, Member Haggerty, absent, Member Kushel, Member McCubbin, Member McKay, absent, Member Nachor, and Member Sheehan Meyer.
Present.
Thank you.
Hey, then I'm gonna need, does everybody had a chance to review the minutes?
Yes.
Yes. Anybody have any questions regarding that or changes? And if not, then I'll look for a motion, please, in a second.
Motion to adopt the minutes from.
Thank you, Anthony.
Second.
Okay, good. We got 2 seconds. Lucy, you can show that Lucy was the first one. And then we need a vote. Any opposed? Everybody approves? Thank you. Okay. Two down. COC member announcements.
Actually, I would like to, make just 2 announcements. Well, first of all, it's like Transit Month is coming this September, and we would like SMART to be part of Transit Month again. And our first meeting will be on May 29th, which will be a Wednesday from 1 to 2 p.m. And I would like, like a SMART to be part of Transit Month this year, especially when usually the North Bay, North Bay agencies are underrepresented from events, regarding Transit Month. So I would love, better participation for Transit Month. And the second and more interesting thing is, I heard from Petaluma Transit that they are offering free rides for everybody for 2 years starting July the 1st. And I don't know, it's like, if, SMART would like to further promote that event as a way to strengthen transit ridership in the city of Petaluma and, within the rest of the North Bay. Because really, it's like, we need better public transportation options, and, free rides encourage even more people to use public transportation. That's it.
Thank you, Anthony. I just want to say that last year, Friends of SMART participated in Transit Month, and that was in conjunction with SMART staff who fully supported us in those efforts. So they did support last year, and I don't think there's any reason they won't support us this year. Any other announcements?
Sure. I'll just say those afternoon trains are getting really packed. I'm just gonna wager a guess that May is gonna break April, because that 4:30 train, all the seats are taken. So it's good to see, and we're all jostling for space in there.
Ridership, our favorite word. It's no general manager. Is somebody giving his report? Or is there one?
That would be me.
Okay, Heather, take it away.
Member Sheehan, would you like to acknowledge the previous?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I do have announcements. So the Board of Directors Ad Hoc Committee met on April 11th, 24 to review 18 applications. They reappointed 2 individuals representing Marin County and recommended 1 new applicant. They are as follows: Thomas Engdahl, Marin County, reappointed; Lucy Dilworth, Marin County, reappointed; Kevin Haggerty, Marin County, our new member who will be here the next meeting. We'd like to thank Jenna Erickson for her service. And on April 17th, those Board of Directors approved that Ad Hoc Committee recommendations. And so on behalf of the COC, I want to congratulate members Engdahl and Dilworth on their reappointment and welcome member Haggerty, who will be attending our next meeting. Let me know if you have any questions. Check.
Check. Thank you.
General Manager's report. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Heather McKillop. I'm here for the general manager. Eddie is on vacation this week, so I'm going to walk through his report this afternoon. I was going to say this morning, but it's not this morning. Thank goodness. So we're going to cover ridership, construction update, our new initiatives that we have going on, our triennial review, and then open it up for any questions you may have. The first is average weekly ridership. As was mentioned, ridership is doing quite well. And as of, this was last week's average weekday May ridership to date. It is now up to 3,137. So we're slightly higher than that number. but we are 25% over May of 2023 and 23% over May of 2019, our pre-COVID numbers. April ridership was 80,340. And again, you can see it's 37% over April of 23 and 33% over April of 2019 and 8% higher than their previous all-time monthly record. And to date, we're exceeding our fiscal year 2019 numbers. And we continued to exceed that, and we're very excited about that. And you can see we were excited because we got a cake, and we celebrated that way by eating cake. Pathway counts. You mentioned the ridership there, but also last week was an all-time high for bikes on board. So we had a total of 2,792 bikes on board. So that's our highest amount to date. And here's a picture of our new pathway counter in San Rafael. Our smart staff installed our 10th counter. It's located in the San Rafael on Caltrans right away along Lincoln Hill Pathway. And the counts from this location have been included in April's total pathway counts. We'll talk a little bit about our construction activities. If you've been out there, you've seen lots of activity, hopefully, on the north end. This is McDowell Boulevard installing traffic signal conduits. Here's the Petaluma North Station placing the concrete for the platform walls. And then up in Windsor, on our Windsor extension, installing support ties for the undercrossing. And this is also at Windsor, installing right-of-way fencing there. Now to our new initiatives that are going on. You may have heard that there's now going to be an e-trolley, the Rosie trolley in downtown district of Santa Rosa. We are going to be a sponsor, or we are a sponsor because it's now started with Sonoma Clean Power, City of Santa Rosa, and Visit Santa Rosa. It's all electric and ADA accessible, and all rides are fare free. It runs from May 15th to September 29th. And it does have varying times depending on the time of the week. So Wednesday, Thursdays, and Fridays are 5 to 9 p.m., Saturdays 1 to 4 and 5 to 9, and Sundays 11 to 3. And it's a very cute little trolley. If you haven't seen it yet, you have to look at it. It's so cute. We are partnering with Sonoma County Regional Parks to run a summer weekend shuttle to the Russian River. The shuttle stops just west of Smart Connect Weekend Shuttle Zone. And we're partnering to offer a shuttle connection for smart riders to the river. It'll offer a direct ride to Steelhead Beach in the morning and one pickup from the shuttle site in the afternoon. And the project is supporting the transit access to our regional parks. So this is an exciting one, especially if you like going out on the river. This would be a great way to get there this summer. And then we're going to be launching the Smart Connect in Larkspur. We've been talking about this for a little while. It'll launch, soft launch in early June, and then the ribbon cutting will be on June 20th. It will meet, the train will meet the ferry within 5 minutes. And during the weekday, it will run from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then on the weekends from 8:30 to 7:30 p.m. And the exciting one of this for me is it will be also serving Corte Madera malls on demand. So not only the shuttle, but on the weekends, you'll be able to take it over to Corte Madera. And again, you will need to schedule that on the app though. Adult fares are $1.50, seniors and youth are free. And we're currently working in partnership with TAM and Golden Gate. So we're very excited about this one. Again, there'll be more news to come, but look forward to it in the next month that we'll be launching that. I want to talk a little bit about FTA's triennial review, and you go, what in the heck is that? That is an audit that's done of transit agencies every 3 years. It's mandated by Congress since 1982 for those of us that receive urbanized area formula funds, which we do. And again, it occurs every 3 years. That review examines 23 areas of responsibility. So as you go through this, all of these activities are things that they go in depth into. This was our first time to go through this process as a direct federally funded recipient. We ended up responding to 238 questions and provided 805 documents for this review. The timeline was, it started in December 20th, where they requested information. So you get a list of all the information they're requesting. On February 29th, all the documents were due and the responses to the questions. And then they came here in person on April 22nd and 23rd to ask us questions, to ask for additional documentation. They went to see a portion of the pathway that was federally funded. They went to look at the Petaluma station to make sure it met all ADA requirements, et cetera. And then on May 9th, we had an exit conference with them. The results were, out of all of those, one deficiency was identified. And we need to write a procedure and then implement that procedure. So we had been doing some of the activities there, but it was not written down formally, and we didn't have a formal process to implement it. So we felt very, very good that after all that, they only identified one deficiency. We were actually complimented on our procurement process. We had no questions or deficiency, and they called it a model process. So that never happens, that they don't have any deficiency or questions. And then they said our organization was very responsive and organized in our responses to them. So the next steps are, they'll be drafting a report detailing the process, what they found, what they went through, and that will be sent to us on June 10th, and we'll be able to look at that for factual content. We won't be able to change the results, but we can make sure all the information in there is factual. The final report will be received on us by us on or before July 16th. And then we'll have 90 days from that final report to resolve the deficiency. So we have to show that document that we wrote the procedure and then we implemented it within that time frame. So with that, I'd be glad to take any questions you may have.
Lucy? Could you identify the,
Yes, it related to EEO. We identify areas that we maybe need to hire people of certain minority groups, women, men in certain position areas. And we're supposed to identify that and then discuss about that with our leadership on a regular basis, whether that be yearly, quarterly, that we can decide on the time frame for that, and try to identify strategies by which we can better recruit and hire people in those areas where we may be deficient. So we didn't have a procedure and a documented way of disseminating that information to leadership. So we were required to do that.
First, I just want to say what a great thing that Larkspur shuttle is going to start. I mean, those of us who spend time on the train, personally, I don't want to go to San Francisco, but a lot of people do. And the number of times someone has said to me, why isn't there a shuttle? This makes no sense. You know, my elderly friend who can't do the walk or whatever it is. So I think that's super savvy to get that as soon as possible. And that's great that's happening. I had a follow-up question on the pathway counts. I just want to understand kind of the big picture. These right now are sort of discrete parts of pathway. They're not connected. There's going to be a time in the foreseeable future where they are connected. It makes sense to add in more counters because you get a bigger picture. You know, the folks who are riding in San Rafael may not be the folks who are riding in Petaluma. But at some point, you know, I'm sure you're not planning on putting a counter every quarter mile. But there's a point where it's not adding information, or at least we need to think about the information differently. It's not really a count so much as like what's going on in this segment, or just help me understand kind of what the vision. Are you planning to add more counters, or how do you hope to use this information to inform the future, or just help me to get the big picture.
Emily's going to come up and address that.
Good afternoon. Is this working? Yeah. So you're right. There is sort of a point at which more counters, right, does not equal more data. And we've thought about what the average trip length and looked sort of scientifically, what is the average trip length for a bicycle? because we don't want to be double counting people more than we need to. The origination of the counter that was just added was that when we first started this project years ago, we wanted to put 5 in Sonoma and 5 in Marin, just for starters. And it just happened that the one in Marin was on Caltrans right away. And we've been in a process to get permission to put that in. So now it's in. So that was the original set. As we build new pathway segments, we are adding additional counters in those segments as appropriate. In some places, it's required by the grant that we need to report how many people are using that segment. But the goal is to space them out, right, to such a point that our data is valid.
Thanks.
So 2 questions. First of all, on the counters, what's the spacing like in between them so that you can have a rough estimate on how many people use that section of pathway? Emily could answer that one first because I have a second unrelated question to, afterwards.
So I believe the average distance between the counters is 3 or 4 miles at this point. We do have 2 counters that are closer together in San Rafael on either side of the tunnel. And so we take that closeness into account, right, when we look at the data. But in general, I think it's more than 3 miles. I want 3 to 5 is the average distance.
Yeah, because for every 3 to 5 miles, that means I'm gonna need to walk at least an hour just to reach the next counter and be, counted on that particular counter, which might mean there will be some undercounting if there are folks that just walk through the pathway under a mile or so just to get access, between their home and, a grocery store. And, that means there will be some undercounting in some places where you may have even more people using the pathway than expected. That's my, that's my comment right there. And the second question I got is regarding the shuttle for Larkspur. I'm already thinking, since you are proposing to serve the village at Corte Madera and town center Corte Madera, could you envision an idea of expanding the service area to serve also Bonaire Shopping Center, which is on the west side of 101 in Greenbrae, if not also Marin General Hospital, which could be a huge beneficiary for this pilot expansion of the Smart Shuttle from Larkspur?
So there's definitely demand on the west side of the highway. If you've spent any time down there in rush hour, it takes a very long time to move between these points. So the reason that we're serving Corte Madera on the weekends is that there's more space between the trains, right? We have an 1.5 to 2 hour headway between the trains. So there's time for the van to get down to Corte Madera and back. During the week, there isn't. There's only about half an hour, so we can't serve those areas. Our assessment is that to serve downtown Corte Madera, the hospital, downtown Larkspur, all of those areas, it would require a second vehicle. But we could potentially expand in the future if there was demand.
Right, because from what I understand, some people coming in from SMART may want to continue on with a shuttle service that will link them to Bonaire Shopping Center and the medical clinics along Bonaire Road next to Marin General, which would be beneficial for such individuals who may need to access medical services in Greenbrae and nearby Kentfield, if that is even feasible. I mean, Sir Francis Drake Boulevard is already a heavily congested corridor that the current service, Marin Transit 228, runs every hour and does not necessarily meet the trains at Larkspur. So if that's going to be an idea for service expansion, then that will be wonderful to have, especially when you have inconsistent service with Marin Transit with routes 29, which runs weekday rush hours only, and 228, which runs every hour, every day.
Thank you. Thanks, Emily. Any other questions? I have a comment that now it's congratulations. You guys are professional and thorough in almost everything you do. I'm just only kind of sad I didn't get cake. I did have a question on how, on the Russian River expansion excursions, how would people get their kayaks, or is there a service at the endpoint, or how does that work?
So the Russian River Parks shuttle is designed to drop people at Steelhead Beach, where you can rent a kayak or canoe. Yeah. And you can also, I believe they have a inflation station. So you can bring your inner tubes and things like that on the train uninflated, and then you can inflate them at Steelhead Beach.
Perfect answer. Thank you. I should have thought of that. Does anybody else have any questions or comments regarding, oh, go ahead, Lucy.
It doesn't seem to be, there. So I wanted to ask about the fiber optic cable that might be traveling, I'm assuming is going along the extensions of the railway extension, and whether or not there's been any discussion of sharing it with any of the communities, particularly those on the other side of the digital divide, and whether any consideration has been given to using that as a, particularly for government agencies and others, as an amenity.
So I am not aware of those discussions right now, but we can check into that and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's close that and go to public comment on non-agenda items. I don't see anybody in the room that's not kind of related to us. Is there anybody online?
At this time, we show no hands raised for public comment.
All right, thank you. Moving along to our favorite part, the fiscal year 2024-25 draft budget presented by Heather McKillop.
Well, I'm so glad this is your favorite part. That's so exciting to hear. I don't get that response very often. This is Heather McKillop. I am going to turn it over to Claire Springer. She's our budget and grants manager, and she has been working on preparing this budget. So she's going to go through that with you today. I did want to mention there is an opportunity for you to ask questions, to provide input today. But we also wanted to let you know that if you don't have input today, our public comment period is open until the end of the month, until the 31st. So don't feel pressured that you have to come up with something or have had to have read the whole document by today. We can continue to get public comments, and what we'll be doing is addressing those all at one time. So we'll be accumulating those, seeing if there's any overlap so we don't send out the same thing over and over again. We'll be publishing those for the board and letting them know what we incorporated and what we did not incorporate into the budget. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Claire to go through the presentation.
Hello. And I appreciate being here in front of the Citizens Oversight Committee. And I'm here to present our fiscal year 24-25 draft budget. And I'll probably refer to it just as the fiscal year or FY25 draft budget going forward. That's kind of how we imagine things. And going through this, we'll discuss passenger and freight separately. And under passenger, we'll discuss revenues, expenditures by objectives for ridership, pathway, and extensions, and then capital and state of good repair projects, and then our fund balance and reserves. And then under freight, we will discuss our revenues, our expenditures, and then our fund balance and reserves. Okay. Under passenger revenues, you'll see on this page, oh, whoops, maybe on this page, these are our estimated revenues. There's a table here that's also included in the draft budget document. So if you want to look closer at that, it is in there, as are most of these tables. So if anything, you know, it's pretty small on the screen. It's hard to see. But what you can get out of this is 42% of our revenues are coming from our sales and use tax, so our Measure Q that we discussed. 41% are state funds. 12% are federal funds, and we discussed this a little bit in our budget workshop, but that's higher than in past years. And then 4% is other sources and 1% is other local governments. We'll go discuss passenger expenditures. And we have our smart house. So our smart house is how we conceptualize how we move forward. And it gives us our mission and our vision and just lists out our values, sorry. Our pillars are what we divide the budget by. So we'll discuss ridership pathways and extensions in that format. So under ridership, our strategies are to finish construction and open Petaluma North Station, complete the Windsor extension, and open the Windsor Station, implement 2 additional round trips, continue our youth and seniors ride free program that started this April, our public information sign design and implementation projects, additional shuttle service locations that we are starting now. But so that means that we will have the location at airport and at Larkspur is where we are planning those. We'll work with transit providers to improve bus and ferry connections, undertake our quality of life study and continue our enhanced marketing plan, as well as continue monitoring the system and ridership and adjusting where necessary. And this is based off of our ridership estimate of 904,200 riders, which was or is a 10% increase from our estimate for FY24. So, and then if you look at the table on the right, you'll see kind of how we're planning on expending that money. So we move on into pathways, our strategies and expenditures. So we are constructing the funded segments of the pathway. So these include the Santa Rosa to Windsor pathway as part of the Windsor Extension project, segments 2 and 3 from the Sonoma County pathway, which is part of the Petaluma North project, and then completing McGinnis to Smith Ranch Road. And we are also seeking out further grant funding to construct these other segments of the pathway. We're naming the Hannah Ranch Road to Vintage Way and Guerneville Road to Airport Boulevard. So we do have some money in the budget to start that process, but we are still seeking out further funds to be able to construct those. And then on our next slide, we have, there we go. It's hard to see from here, so forgive me for that, but these are our segments that are currently under construction. So we have Airport Boulevard to Windsor River Road, which is 2.6 miles. Golf Course Drive to Bellevue Avenue is 2.8 miles. South Point Boulevard to Main Street is 2.9 miles. And then the McGinnis Pathway or Parkway to Smith Ranch Road is 0.9 miles. And those are the currently under construction segments. So under pathways, our expenditures, our plan is to complete design and permitting of the pathway segments under the Marin Sonoma Pathways project. And this involves, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different segments. So we have Main Street to East Railroad, Joe Rodota Trail, Santa Rosa Downtown Station to 6th Street. And you'll see, so I guess I don't need to list out every single one, but you'll see we have the segment and then the number of miles. So overall, this Marin Sonoma Pathway is 6.2 miles. And then under Marin Pathways, we have 5.95 miles. And those include the segments listed. And then the Portezuelo to San Pedro Road section as well. Under extensions, again, our goal is to open the Petaluma North Station, complete the Windsor extension, and open the Windsor Station. We are continuing to work on the North Extension to Cloverdale, so design and build the portions that are funded. And for Healdsburg, we have partial funding. So in the budget is some money for design and partial construction. We're continuing our effort to get our extensions into the Plan Bay area. And then as far as the east-west rail is concerned, We're continuing our participation in the Highway 37 corridor activities. And we're working with partners to incorporate rail into that project, completing our Caltrans Rail Service Plan analysis and partnering with Caltrans and the FRA Corridor ID program for that east-west section. And you can see, so we kind of split out here what the funding for the extensions is, and then we'll go into our next slide, which is our actual funding for how we are funding these projects. Again, it's a little small. But so for Petaluma North, in FY25, we have the station, the pathways, or the SoCo pathways and McDowell Crossing, as well as the McDowell paving. And so those are our different projects, and you'll see how the funding is split out there between different grant funding, different funding through other local governments, et cetera, et cetera. And then under our Windsor Extension program, or Windsor Extension funding plan here, again, it's just split out into the different segments, how we think about this funding. And you'll see different amounts for each. And then Healdsburg, this is our estimated plan as of FY24. So we're saying as of now, this is what we're thinking. We're funding a small amount in FY25, and then we anticipate further work when further funds are received in future fiscal years. So for our expenditures, we recently received the results of this compensation study and we implemented them. And they resulted in new and wider salary bands for non-represented employees, the elimination of salary steps. Our COLA recommendation for FY25 is 3%. This results in an up to 5% total increase, including the cost of living increase, for those not at the top of their pay range. Represented employees will be consistent with their CBAs, collective bargaining agreements. And then for benefits, we are anticipating an overall increase of about 10%. So salaries and benefits of current positions, we're looking at $27,147,608. And then new positions, we have 6 new FTE positions, 2 limited positions, and 1 new intern that are included in this budget. And that budget impact is $1,038,000 inclusive of benefits. Our other expenditures, we're looking at the capital and state of good repair projects. So this features all of our IT projects for the next fiscal year. The next slide includes our non-revenue vehicles, so just our fleet vehicles, shuttle project, dispatch software project, as well as our track and maintenance of way projects and revenue vehicle projects. And then on this last page of projects, I believe, we have engineering projects. So expansion that we already talked about, a couple of miscellaneous projects, as well as pathways, and our environmental and mitigation projects that go along with our segments, our extensions, and our pathway segments. So in summary, we're looking at all of our revenues and then all of our expenditures planned for FY25. This encapsulates all of that. And we will talk about our fund balance and reserves for passenger. So our pension and OPEB liability reserve for FY24 year end will be $4,574,676. And we're adding $1 million with this FY25 budget for a year end at the end of this fiscal year 25 of $5,574,676. Our vehicle and equipment reserve, we're adding $2 million in FY25. So by the end of FY25, we'll be at $12,625,000. our corridor completion fund, we are not adding any additional money for FY '25. Our operating reserve, we're adding $450,000 in FY '25 for a year end of $11,728,617. And then our fund balance, we're estimating at the end of FY '24 to be $81,342,877. This budget utilizes $20,465,302 of that fund balance. So we're estimating the year end for FY '25 fund balance at $60,494,300. On to freight. So freight revenues.
Is that all right? Dave wants to ask questions during the
that's fine.
presentation?
Yeah.
Or do you, that
No.
just thought, well,
No, you're good. Yeah.
Go ahead.
no,
Want to go back?
I think that's on.
Yeah.
No, I'm good. Thank you for that presentation. I wanted to go back to ridership and just try to understand the thinking in terms of where the dollars are being spent from a marketing standpoint. I think a lot of what I heard is around operations, building track, the shuttles, all of which sound like great programs, the seniors and youth ride free. In looking at kind of where we're spending dollars in pure marketing to get more people on the train, all I'm really seeing here is the $200,000 line item for the continuation of the enhanced marketing plan, as well as $500,000 on a website redesign, which seems like an expensive website redesign. So I just would I just want to understand internally, is there talk of, embarking on a new marketing campaign in general, right, to the tune of $500,000, $1.5 million? Has that been talked about internally to really start reaching new people to get them on the train associated with the train? That's certainly something I'd like to see more dollars go towards. So I'm just curious what the thinking is internally.
I'm Julia Gonzalez, Communications and Marketing Manager for SMART. The line item that you're referring to, the $200,000, that is what we have our communications and marketing efforts are focused on two tracks. One is the ridership, the getting people on the train and people in the seats. And so that 200,000 is for those efforts. And then there is, in this current fiscal year, the board approved additional funds for a completely different track, which is to educate the community about the benefits that SMART brings to the community. And so that is taking the shape of a mailer that is going to go to every home and business in Sonoma and Marin County. And then there is additional funds were approved to do a video campaign, but solely the focus of those monies in this current fiscal year is to focus on just education. What you're looking at for the next budget is, again, we're going back to that track of increasing ridership and getting people on board the train.
So that's helpful. So how would I look into this budget and try to understand how much is SMART spending on marketing? I don't have a clear answer on that from looking at the different line items. So I'm just curious, how do you look at that?
So
Because it's probably falling in a few different buckets, right? I guess.
the $200,000 that is in that line is strictly for marketing efforts, and that takes the shape of advertising, purchasing advertising. We have a completely different line item that is the efforts that we do to get out in the community and do community events and fairs. And I will add that 200,000 is, we managed to stretch that because it is actually a very lean budget considering the footprint that we have to reach the two counties. We managed to get the most out of that money by doing the graphic design in-house.
Right.
So just to add a little
Mhm.
to that, so there is, as she was mentioning, there is a base budget that they have, that they do their routine outreach, things that enhance ridership, knowledge about SMART, what we're doing, those type of things. This 200,000 and the money she was also describing is on top of that budget. So her base budget and then on top of that, and we can provide that total budget you are
So is the
interested in
base
that.
budget really for the headcount in the marketing department, or is there also, there's programmatic budget that's part of that as well?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, I think just getting an understanding for how much SMART is spending on marketing the train to this, 750,000 people across Marin and Sonoma County, I think would just be helpful. I think, when I look at this and I see a $200,000 line item
Mhm.
out of a $52.9 million ridership, it's an infinitesimally small number. And I'm betraying my personal view here. I think we need to get more people on the train. And, I'd rather spend money on reaching new people than, I'm not picking on the website redesign. I'm sure it's a thoughtful project and an important project, but those are folks that already are coming to the SMART website because they're probably going to ride the train. I'd rather try to find more buckets of dollars to reach new people. I think it's absolutely critical for the future success of the train. And my perception is that, it's not clearly spelled out how much is being spent there. And my suspicion is that it might be a number that I personally think should be higher. So thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to say, Julia, that I've been seeing the marketing online because I read the papers, so I'm old fashioned, but I don't read the paper. I read it electronically. And so I think there was a full page in Sunday's paper, which was half education and half advertising, or I don't know how you budgeted that. They also do a lot of, what do they call that on the different web pages?
The digital ads?
Yes,
Yeah,
the
so we-
digital ads.
Yeah,
So
so
I've been-
we do what are called roadblocks on, if you go to read the newspaper and you read it digitally, you have to see the ad before you get to the newspaper. I would like to just spend a moment to talk about the website redesign that is in that budget item. It's a necessary update that is happening because we need to get to the next level of software. And our website is our primary marketing tool. And yes, you're right, we do get a fair number of visitors, but we'd like to have more people come to that website. And it needs to have features that are more set up for a writer for trip planning, for just ease of getting information for ticket purchases. And some of these are widgets and versions of new technology that we can't incorporate in our current site.
Thank you for clarifying. I think that sounds important. Yep.
And it really does need an update. It's sort of like building the train, running the train.
Yeah.
Now we built the website, now we have to run the website. And so it is a high number, but I'm not going to pretend that I understand what all goes into that. Any other questions? And then we'll let Claire finish.
I do have a quick question regarding the Petaluma North and Windsor, stations. My primary concern is in terms of first mile, last mile, and transit connectivity. From what I understand, there may be a budget allocated for developing, intermodal, connections at both stations. But I would really like to know how much of the budget will eventually be allocated to not just provide intermodal connections, but also to promote those services, because a lot of the times, some of these, folks who already ride the trains may not be aware of the onward connections, especially, for example, Petaluma downtown, wherein you have to walk towards Copeland Street Transit Mall or to the Taco Bell to get to their buses. So I would really like to know how much of the budget will be allocated, not just for, promoting the connections, but also for supplementaries like wayfinding and, hopefully time connections so that passengers don't have to wait that long for their onward trips.
So this is Heather. So I don't have that number handy, but we have a combination of things that describe what you're doing, and it's located throughout the budget. So for instance, the shuttle budget. So we have money for the shuttles, the first and last mile, and there are various things that are going on there besides just the shuttles. Then we have the wayfinding program that we're implementing. So we have that project going on right now. It's been under design and it will be implemented shortly. And then in a lot of the things that are already done through Julia's marketing, we try to point out, like we had one campaign that tried to point out all the places you could go and eat at certain locations when you get off the station, or is it February, where you point out all the breweries that are around. So they're not as kind of in your face as this is where you need to go, but they do provide different points of connectivity throughout different marketing campaigns that we have, as well as the wayfinding, as well as trying to do our own first last mile through the shuttles, as well as our website, which tries to show you what are the other connections that are out there. And then you can also do that through like the transit app or online through our process, which we hope to make a more smoother process to be able to look it out online. So there isn't one particular place where you can go and say, this is what we're spending on that connectivity piece, but it's really spread throughout the entire budget and all the things that we're doing there.
Right, because from what I understand, when you have when you have agencies like Petaluma Transit or Sonoma County Transit or City Bus, those are the agencies that will benefit from improved connectivity, especially when you have a train and then there's a bus waiting for you within 5 to 10 minutes of departure, which would be wonderful. But in reality, it's not always the case, which is why I really would like to see some part of the budget actually dedicated to improving the connectivity at those stations, investing, let's say, on real-time departures, departure boards at stations, so that passengers don't have to keep looking at their clock and or a schedule book and say this bus will arrive supposedly in 5 minutes when it actually arrived like 15 minutes later. So something like that. Thank you.
Yeah, and we do have a project also for real-time signs at the stations right now going on too this next year. So yeah,
then-
all of that we're trying to accomplish through different methodologies to try to get to what you're describing. I don't know that it's as easy as just saying this is the budget, that we have all of those things in one place. They're dispersed throughout, but we can try to describe the things that we're doing to improve that last mile connectivity to the other providers in our area too.
Thank you. Excellent.
And Anthony, that's part of what they do all day, every day, is try to improve the connectivity. So Claire, will ask you to please, thank you for the interruption, but please continue.
Sure. Yes, and I know our,
Did you want to go online on this section, or do you want to wait till the end?
I
for
think I'd
that?
like to wait till the
Okay.
end of the presentation.
yeah, I was going to say our planning department is hard at work generally on those issues. Okay, so. And everybody. So for freight, we're looking at our revenue table. And you can see on the right-hand side how these revenues are distributed. We're seeing these freight movement fees are 39%. We have the state grant for 22%. Leases are 15%. 6% is storage in this budget, and 14% is that 45G tax credit and other miscellaneous. So the total revenues come out to $1.8 million. And then under freight expenditures, our strategies for this year are to increase our annual revenue, secure funding for capital and state of good repair improvements, market freight and storage opportunities at SMART, leverage our storage track at Shellville and at Burdell, and promote transload opportunities at our Shellville station, as well as acquire new business and potentially examine our freight tariffs and consider increasing our fees. And then manage our maintenance requirements of the bridges, the tracks, the crossings, the equipment, et cetera. And as you can tell, this is a very lean representation of that. So we're looking at salaries and benefits of $870,000. And then operations, so just general day-to-day operations at $767,290, and capital projects at $167,920 for a balanced budget of $1,805,309. And so our reserves and fund balance, we have no operating reserve for freight. And our FY '24 year-end balance, fund balance, we're estimating at $393,549. And we are estimating that our FY '25 year-end will be 0. So for next steps, we are here at the COC meeting on the 22nd. Public comments are due May 31st. We'll incorporate those comments if appropriate, and then our final budget will go to the board for their approval on June 18th. Questions?
Okay,
Yeah,
Please.
this is more of a general question than on the specific budget, but with the state being in such dire straits on on finances, are we concerned about future funding?
This is Heather. There's kind of two parts to that question. The immediate issue of what's going on with the budget and what's been released recently. And I don't think it will have much of an impact on our regular ongoing formula funds. There have been some proposed reductions to some of the capital programs that may leave less money and less availability for competition in those programs for this upcoming period of time. I think as we all need to be concerned going forward that a lot of those state dollars that we receive, as well as the federal dollars that we receive, are based on gas and diesel tax. And so as we get more and more electric cars, you know, and they're not paying into that fund, there's going to be less and less dollars available that we rely on for operational costs as well as for capital. So it's kind of a two-part. I don't think the immediate is influential on us right now. But you never know because they're still working on it. So things are changing daily right now. But I think we did see some reductions in some of the capital programs that are out there at the state level. So there'll actually be more competition for less dollars probably. And then ongoing, we continue to see, and we've kind of built that into our numbers into the future as we do long range planning, that we'll probably continue to see some eroding of those dollars that are dependent both on the federal and state level on some form of gas tax.
Thank you.
Can I ask about the federal level and what you see changing? Because we just got a new influx of, anyway, what's your opinion or foresight on that?
So right now, we've been very fortunate with the changes in the federal level as far as the dollar amounts going up for our formula money, which is what we call our 5307 preventative maintenance money. We use that to offset costs in our operations area. We also are going to be, our first year, we're going to be a recipient of what we call State of Good Repair money, 5337. We've estimated as much as $6.3 million coming in from that funding source, which is huge. And that's designed to take care of the infrastructure that you've built. You get it 7 years after you've opened your line. And it's intended to keep your system in a state of good repair. So with those two funding sources together, that's around $10 million a year that we get just on an ongoing basis. So as that dynamic changes in the future, whether it be because the trust fund at the federal level has less and less money, and they have to appropriate more and more money from the general fund, it will be impacted. So it's hard to say. It's, you know, it's very political at the federal level too. And I think a lot of it will depend on what comes forward with the election and what the presidential stance is on transportation and transit in particular as to how those levels of allocation. But right now they've been consistently higher the last few years than they have ever been before.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
So I have a few comments. I have one request and one clarification question. First, I just want to say thanks to the staff. I mean, it's clear how much work went into making this as clear as possible, and also just the outreach, inviting people from the public to comment. I think that's really, you know, I feel as a COC member, it's my job to make sure that people have a chance to comment, and you're doing that. So I want to appreciate the work that's gone into putting together the budget. and the work you all do. I saw in some of the documentation, the real-time info boards plan and grant that came in. I look forward to learning more when we get closer to the date. I'm sure we'll get some info. That sounds awesome. I'm really glad to hear about that. Really glad to see the continued investment in the pathway. That's awesome. A lot of what inspired me to want to be on the COC was just that the pathway was not meeting what the voters had asked for, and SMART's really moving in the right direction to address that. So nothing more to say on that, except for it's great. The additional train trips coming, that's great to hear. That extra one in the morning, I think all of us in the morning know that there's a real need for that. So that's great. So here's my request to consider this for the budget. Close after the grumbling about the Larkspur connection, probably the next most common comment you get, I literally have strangers say this to me on the platform, is there's not enough space for bikes. And I wanted to suggest that SMART consider putting into the budget, funding a study. For example, if a design firm could look and say, okay, if you took out one table in each car for half your cars, make sure those run at commute hours, just as an example. Obviously, I'm not a design expert on trains, but maybe fund a study to look at how, with some minor modifications, the existing trains could accommodate more bikes. One of the things I think happens is we get a little bit of the count of the bikes doesn't tell you the whole story, because lots of folks have these larger scooters that are actually in the bike spots as well. So you may look at the numbers and say, gosh, it seems like there's still room for bikes. I think the more the merrier. I'm glad people are taking these scooters and all these other things. But let's all think out. These are riders who are providing their own first last mile. And when people get to the point where they don't think it's going to be accommodated, they consider not taking the train. So that's my request, to consider that. And then a request to explain so there's a few things in here. You work to make the budget as accurate as possible. There's things out of our control, like some of these grants around housing, I think. And then also if it's a recession, then the sales tax is less. Help me to understand, if the revenues are not what's in the budget, how does that work? Like, is there, I imagine if we have a contract with a contractor, that can't be cut. Is there a prioritization? Does everyone who's not in a contract shave off a certain percent? How does it work if revenues are not as predicted? Thank you.
Well, that's a big question. So it really depends on the funding source, because a lot of our funding sources are very specific for very specific things. So those might be things that we would not have prioritized as high, but because they have a funding source associated with them, then perhaps they become higher, right? Because if you don't do that, you won't get the funding source. So we really look at what type of capital projects do we have out there, is where we would typically start and say, what things do we not have in contract? What things can we hold off on? What things can be deferred? An example of things that typically come to the top of the list would be like non-revenue vehicles. So our fleet vehicles, right? Can we hold on to those for a couple more years? Are they needing to be replaced? I mean, serviced a lot, or are they in really good shape still, even though they've exceeded their useful life? So those are just, it's one that rises to the top all the time that you look at first in the capital arena. How can you save those dollars? Then you start looking for efficiency savings and things that you can cut within your operational costs. Salaries is usually typically about 70% of our total costs. So unfortunately, that's usually what gets looked at first, because that's where the bulk of the money is. And then with salary starts coming service, because we need the people to run the service. And so you then look at other things within the budget that you can do that wouldn't impact service, because as soon as you start having to reduce service, everything starts reducing, your revenues start reducing, people's willingness to want to ride the system and be supportive of the system, those type of things. So it really is a very complex set of things that you look at if you start reducing revenues. Now, we do a plan that goes all the way out. Our last plan went out to 2035. It continues to be out to 2035. We continue to tweak that as we get more and more information. And then we discuss that internally on a regular basis. And then that becomes part of the short range plan that we present to the board. And then we ultimately give to MTC, based on those changes. That gets updated about every 3 to 5 years. The last couple of years, it's been 2 years in a row. So with that, we constantly are paying attention. Of course, the big thing that I look at right now is fiscal year 29. So in March of 29, we will not have a sales tax in place unless we go back to the voters. So one of my goals has been to see, make sure we're setting enough money aside to be able to get us through fiscal year 29, continuing to operate and add service as necessary, but not add too much service that we can't support that. If we had to go a little longer than 29, or if what we need to support post 29, assuming our sales tax gets reauthorized, right? So for us, it's a little different than how I normally look at it, because you would look at those revenue streams going indefinitely. But in this case, we have a very firm deadline. So that's kind of the first thing that we're always monitoring is what does it look like to get there, and how much capital can we afford to match and support and do in order to also keep enough funds in our reserve to be able to get us to 29.
Sandy?
Yeah, on that subject of taking it back to the voters, do you have an update on what's going on with Dodd's bill?
So Dodd's bill is 904, right?
Yeah.
No, I don't have a status other than it is still waiting to move through the committee process. So it's made it, I believe, through appropriation or through transportation and what's the other? There's one other committee it made it through, and it's sitting and waiting for appropriations, is my understanding.
Okay.
It's my understanding, went through the Senate. It is now on the Assembly.
Oh, it is on the assembly.
Yeah.
Oh, it's on the assembly? Good.
Lucy?
Thank you. I have a question about the fare revenue and specifically the fare box recovery. You have the number six, well, you have 6% listed as the fare box recovery. And it was my understanding that, in fact, due to the youth and senior program, that had gone down to 5%. Is that's a, can you explain that? Or maybe it hasn't taken effect yet, or?
So I'll look at that, but yeah, the numbers that are in the book for fiscal year 23 are for last fiscal year, right? So that's what.
So, and when did the senior program?
So the senior program just went in effect in April of this year, so which would be fiscal year 24. So it will have an impact on that, and we have made estimates as General Manager Cummins had presented in a previous presentation, that we estimate that to drop down to 5% based on those free fares for senior and youth. But it will probably be a while before we see what that impact will be. But yes, we continue to have our average fare go down over time. When I first started here in 2020, it was $5.76, and I think we're down to $3 and something cents. And that's a result of the board's purposeful goal of reducing overall fares. The first big move was the 40% reduction back in 2021 to reduce all fares by about 40%. And then since then, we have had other incentives as we go along, and the latest kind of large one being free fares for youth and seniors.
Another question. Sorry.
I just want to interject because I believe as a budget item, when you considered the free fares, it was around 240,000 or $40,000, like $1,000.
Correct. That's
So
what we
for a
estimated.
decent marketing budget is nothing, and the ridership per dollar spent, that's what they considered. And there's more information on that, but that was a thoughtful process that actually had a dollar amount attached to it and what that would cost and what the benefit would be.
Yeah. Thank you. Another question is that since this is, we're heading towards 2029, and whether there have been any, as far as I can see, there's no set-asides for the cost of going for a sales tax renewal, obviously in the next fiscal year. And what happens if there is a decision to move ahead with that? Where would you get the funds?
So, as I mentioned, we have fund balance and on a very regular basis, sometimes every month, we do amendments to our budget. And so if the board decided to move forward with that and we needed to appropriate funds for whatever that might entail, then the board could take action, direct us to take action to bring forward a budget request to them to fund that at any time.
Okay.
There is no, we have no statutory requirements on when we can bring forward budget amendments. It's just if they exceed our existing authority, we have to bring them in front of the board.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Any more questions? Thank you. And given that, I'll take it to the online, and we seem to have a hand up.
First up for public comment is Smarty.
Sorry about the name. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say I'm glad to see the last detailed report that was presented included debt service, but unfortunately, all of these detailed reports are far too low resolution. You can't see anything hardly on them. I appreciate in the future if you would bump them up to a higher resolution. Anyway, it looked like 36 million for debt service, something like that. And I'm here to ask that debt service be included in the calculation of subsidies per ridership. So and it's not at the moment, and it's an operating cost, it's an annual cost, it should be included as a cost, and it should be included as in the subsidy. And when it is included in the subsidy, the sales tax subsidize smart ridership per round trip. You can divide it by 2 to get it per trip, but per round trip in 2022 is $240 per rider per round trip. In 2021, it's $518. This is nothing like what was presented to the grand jury in Marin County, by the way. In 2020, it's $168. And in 2019, it's $128. That is this subsidy per round trip. And I sent an email to you, it should be in your inbox right now, toc@sonomamarintrain.org. That's your email, I believe. And the links to the web page that explains that calculation. And that web page has the source of the SMART document that explains the calculation even more. So I would appreciate if the Citizens Oversight Committee would look into that and make sure that that is reported as what I think it should be. And especially when it comes to the Marin County Grand Jury being presented figures that don't include debt service.
We have heard you. Thank you for your comments, and we'll take the next comment.
Next up for public comment is Mike.
Hello, everyone. I thought first I would explain why I've asked for operating expenses consistent with the National Transit Database. The reason why this is an important number is because the way operating expenses get presented in different formats, they don't align with the way that other transit operators present them for the National Transit Database. And so I've asked that those be included, since I'm sure Heather McKillop has an estimate for what the NTD basis for the expenditures would be on an estimated basis for this fiscal year, and also what is included in the forecast. And from that, a variety of the other measures on table B11 could be estimated. There was a comment, Heather made a comment regarding this brochure, or the other speaker, being mailed to every household and business in the 2 counties. First of all, a little history. It's a very expensive proposition to do that. They don't get to mail it for free. The second thing is it tends to be an advertising brochure rather than being a complete brochure. That's been the history. They usually do it before elections in order to win over votes. And I'd be interested in the COC's take on whether or not a brochure like that should include all the information that's relevant to the voters. And as indicated in Measure I, one of the key issues that's relevant to the voters is, as the last speaker noted, was the amount it's costing taxpayers to subsidize each rider to take the train. And then finally, with regards to, is there going to be a ballot measure in November? It would be good if Heather would explain the requirements for doing an expenditure plan and what would befall the COC, because that was one of their roles in prior elections, was reviewing the expenditure plans before it was adopted by the board. Thank you very much.
Heather, are there any of those points you want to take today?
Yeah, I'll just address a couple. First of all, the first caller, I think that's an incorrect statement. Debt service is not an operating cost. Debt service is a specific cost of financing capital. So I don't think you'll ever find debt service ever associated with operating ever. It is always a cost of capital. And in fact, we are prohibited from issuing debt for operating costs, as most entities are. So I just want to clarify that I don't think you'll ever find debt service as a cost of operating. I think in regards to any of the other questions, we can address those as we move forward, but we typically don't put estimates of NTD data into our budget because they're estimates. A lot changes throughout the years, but we do provide the actual factual information that we have provided to the NTD in previous years that has been validated by NTD, because they have to do that before they publish it. We do provide information as we submit it before it's even released to the public through a PRA that Mr. Arnold requests every year, and we have done that every year. But again, it may change because, again, it's an estimate. I think the information that's contained in the budget is factual and accurate and to the best of our knowledge at this time, as it will change. And as we noted previously, we do have the opportunity to be able to adjust this budget, which is a plan. I mean, that's why it's called a budget, is because it's a plan of expenditures moving forward. As it relates to the COC's role in an expenditure plan, as we've been talking over the last few months, we're in that process of the strategic planning process right now. We've gone through all the listening sessions. That information has been presented to this board. We are now out in the community talking to different people, attending different events when we're invited somewhere to discuss what we're doing here. You guys have been involved in some of that. We've had some of those comments here. That timeframe is over this summer. I'm sorry, I don't have that schedule in front of me, but we start again, and maybe Emily remembers a little better, but we start again in a few months, bringing that back up again, showing you the expenditure plan, showing you the strategic plan and all the information we've gathered, and trying to assimilate that into a plan going forward, which a result of that will be an expenditure plan after we get through that strategic planning process. So we've outlined that in previous meetings, and I apologize, I don't have that handy, but we can provide you that schedule again.
Thank you. Is there any more clarity, questions? Claire, did you have anything you wanted to point out? Thank you very much. And thank you to the, oh, sure, of course. I'm sorry. Sorry.
One of the concerns that I think Mr. Arnold has, and I guess as a taxpayer representative I have, which is that the listening sessions and presentations to the COC have all been very thorough and I think nuanced and reached a certain segment of the population. I don't see that the budget creation process or the strategic plan has really focused on addressing the specifics of the issues that defeated the sales tax previously, and will probably be used by those who oppose the sales tax at the next time it's floated forward. And whether or not that would be a reasonable approach for the COC to at least hear, if not, and understand what's going to be coming at the next election and the next ballot. And I think we need to look more closely at those issues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, hearing no more comments, some of these are just, there's no there, so it's not quite possible. There's a committee and decisions haven't been made.
Yeah.
And might not be made this year. So we just kind of have to, there's no there at this time. So,
Well, I mean, issues such as ridership have been addressed and very thoroughly.
and the listening
that-
sessions and I think
but
that,
also generally by the agency. Just there are other ones that are, I think, needing attention and needing surfacing, just so that the public can feel that there's been a hard look at their points of view, whether or not they're very strong, but that there has been a look and a recognition that these are the issues that are going to be arising. Thank you.
thank you. Okay, go back to my agenda here. And I think that concludes our meeting. I just want to urge the board to remember that the committee, that these documents are online. They're also to the general public, that they're a lot easier to read page by page. But it's not just this presentation, it's actually all posted for you. And then I would like to urge my committee to be there on 6/20 when Larkspur launches its EV shuttle, because the last time at the airport was really phenomenal, and I suspect this one will be even bigger. So, given there's no more business, I think we'll ask for a adjournment after we note that the next meeting of the Citizens Oversight Committee will be July 10th, 1:30 in this room. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Thank you. Second? All right. I don't think anybody's going to argue with that. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time and attention.